Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Hello all and welcome to episode 4 of Monorail Memoirs. This week we will be discussing FastPass versus Genie Plus. What is better, what is better for the consumer, what's better in terms of overall experience, and a little bit of our opinions on what we think, whether or not Disney did the right thing by moving towards it. But before we get started, as always, Lauren, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yo, surviving, thank you. I think it's a good way of putting it on this fine day here. The weather's really nice outside, actually, and I myself have just got back from a week in Florida.
I was just about to ask about that.
Yeah, specifically a week in Animal Kingdom Lodge with a Savannah view. You may have seen on our YouTube channel a little quick tour of the room there, but a fantastic experience. And as a Disney Vacation Club member, we are very fortunate where we have access to these things at a more affordable price point than most people. I highly recommend Animal Kingdom Lodge if you care about animals. My highlight is we were able to sit on our balcony and just watch giraffes. What a unique experience. It's fantastic. You know, there was other animals there like wildebeests and zebras and what have you, but it was a great time and highly recommended. A pro tip I will give, however, is do not get a Ram 2500 pickup truck because you can't access parts of the underground car park due to the clearance only being 6'5" when the truck's about 6'7". So get a normal size car, folks. That's a good tip. But nevertheless, we will now get on to the topic we have in hand today. So the question today is FastPass versus Genie Plus. Which one was better? We're going to take a moment to break down what FastPass was and how that compares and differs to Genie Plus itself, and then a little bit of our sort of opinions on value for money and what we think is the best consumer advice. So with that being said, then, Lauren, you remember FastPass, and then there was a moment where it was FastPass Plus, then Genie Plus. What do you sort of recall about the differences between them and the experiences you're able to have as a result?
Yeah, so I think that with the FastPass, I distinctly remember you being tasked with walking very briskly to the back of the park with everyone's tickets to try and get a FastPass for Big Thunder or, Splash Mountain or Space Mountain, if we're in Magic Kingdom. And to me, that was like part of the thrill of it, just like running to the back to try and get to it. And then obviously we moved a little bit more with the times and FastPass Plus came, which was on the My Disney Experience app, which was sometimes good and sometimes not so good. Obviously there was perks if you were in the resorts, because then you were able to get there. I think it was 90 days beforehand or something like that, or it could be 90 or 60.
Yeah, 60 rings a bell.
Yeah, and then 30 if you were not staying on resort.
Yeah,
and obviously.
It's interesting you mentioned that because for those that are new to this idea, the original FastPass was a physical ticket. It was about a year big. It was a physical ticket that you would have to go to the machines at that ride, put your park pass in. It then would feed out a little slot that was a time window for which you should return. And so the advantage that we had when I was a little bit younger and perhaps willing to run around the parks, got told off for that once or twice, but perhaps willing to run around the parks, as Lauren says, we could make a dash for the back of the park with everybody who was with us, feed all the tickets in, get all of the fast passes out with that time window. And what it meant is that if you were willing to schedule your day accordingly, you could run from location to location, send the runners out or the brisk walkers out to be able to try and get as much done as possible. And that really changed when FastPass Plus came about, because what did you have to do for FastPass Plus then, Laura?
Yeah, so you had to I think it was you had 3 reservations that you could make per day, but then you had different classifications of rides. So you couldn't do all the big rides. You could only have, I think it was 1 big ride, and then a couple of subsequent littler rides. Kind of it would have been maybe It's a Small World or Haunted Mansion or something like that wasn't in the big kind of traditional e-ticket attractions. And to me, it wasn't kind of fair. I know that when you stay on a resort, you do get certain perks, and I understand that they wanted to give that certain perk, but Yeah, I just feel like it didn't like level the playing field.
So the thing with FastPass Plus that I always found interesting was I actually think it took away the advantage of those who sort of knew what they were doing with the park. And what I mean by that is because we could send people to run around and what have you, we were able to get more out of a single Disney day than for someone who was perhaps new to the park, didn't understand how FastPass worked, didn't understand that you could, stack them and run from one to another. We really, as Disney fanatics, were able to take advantage of the original FastPass system in a way that FastPass Plus didn't allow us to do, because as you say, there was usually one e-ticket attraction per day you're allowed to book for, and then two other attractions. So if you were in Magic Kingdom, you were probably going to book a Splash Mountain or Big Thunder Mountain as your e-ticket attraction, and then the other two attractions, you may do a Haunted Mansion, for example, or the greatest ride of all time in the Carousel of Progress. And by
why
being
anyone
able
would waste a fast pass on the Carousel of Progress, I do not know.
Perfection cannot ever be wasted, and nor should it be. But the idea though of FastPass Plus came in, and I think in part it was to help mitigate that difference between those who really knew how to use the system and game the system to a certain degree, versus those who were perhaps less familiar with Disney, less familiar with the setup and how it worked. But I think overall it was a slight negative in terms of the customer experience. FastPass, if you knew what you were doing, you could knock that out of the park and you get an awful lot done. But then FastPass Plus, not quite as effective. Out of the two, then, which do you think had the better customer experience?
I do definitely think that FastPass had a better customer experience, because also, you kind of hoping that people are literate on their phones. You're relying on people having that technology and understanding that they've got to download the My Disney Experience app, that they can access it 60 or 30 days before they go. And so I think that the point that we were making before about the more experienced Disney goers and the Disney fanatics, they would still know that, whereas the one-time goers possibly might not. They might not have read about that, they might not have been told about that.
And actually, you make an interesting point, and we'll come on to it when talking a little bit more about Genie Plus. But do you think, though, that now it is becoming increasingly more difficult for the casual consumer to enjoy a trip to Walt Disney World?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of really confusing, and especially for someone as well who understands Disney. And I read a lot about Disney, and I listen to podcasts very much like this and all that sort of stuff. And even to me, it's a bit confusing. I don't know whether or not I'm coming or going with Disney Plus, Genie Plus sometimes. It can be really, really confusing, especially for the people who aren't in those realms as well.
Agreed. And it appears to me that from a parks and experiences position, that Disney is trying to get people to plan their trips further in advance than previously. As with FastPass, it was day of, you could go and do, as where now, as the move towards FastPass Plus happened, it was more of a planning cycle. And I think we see this as well with Disney dining. If you're staying at a Disney resort, you can book 2 months out. And so, having some of those more premier reservations available straight after the bat is really important. A good example, we've just been to Animal Kingdom Lodge, as mentioned, and we spent one evening, we had at the Japanese pavilion in Epcot, we went to Teppanyaki for teppanyaki, which was my first sort of experience with that. Fantastic dit, by the way. The chef, she managed to take little thin slices of onions and stack them up with a carrot nose and make an Olaf, and it was very cute. And then she just went, "Okay, bye," and just chopped it into several different pieces. It was fantastic and a real experience. But yeah, Teppanyaki absolutely has my vote as one of the better restaurant experiences in Epcot. We will do an episode in the future focusing solely on Disney food, and I think my wife may make an appearance on that one, as she's very much the foodie out of the two of us here. With that being said, though, I think as Disney has encouraged people to plan more, that forced planning is making it a little more difficult for the casual consumer to understand what's going on. Now, Genie Plus though is different again, and so I know you're drinking your tea there, Lauren, but so how does Genie Plus differ from the previous two systems of FastPass and FastPass Plus?
Yeah, so obviously it's a paid experience, and due to that, a lot of the kind of old time Disney goers are very grudged to pay for said experience because it used to be free. You know, even when it was FastPass Plus, it was free. You know,
Agreed. And I think the thing that's really worth pointing out for those listening that are new to this, so what Genie Plus gives you is the option to go through the Lightning Lane. It's not called FastPass anymore. So you've got the regular standby line, you've got Lightning Lane. It gives you the option to go through Lightning Lanes on almost all attractions. But what you do is you book it on your phone and you are presented with a return window time in the same way that you did with the old school physical FastPass tickets. You're presented with a window in which to return. The problem with that, or at least the problem I think from everybody else's position, is that is a paid service. And depending on what day it is, depending on how busy it is, can be between, $28, $30, $35, $40 a day for this service. So if you're taking a family of 4 on some of the busier days, you can be talking upwards of $120 for the 4 of you on top of the tickets you have already paid for to get these experiences. And I think if you mishandle how you do Genie Plus, you actually may only get 3 or 4 rides in for that.
There's also the added issue of, for some of the really big attractions, you have to pay on top of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So Disney Genie Plus covers most of the rides, but then for ones such as Guardians of the Galaxy is a great example. You would then purchase individual lightning lanes on top of what you have already paid for Disney Genie Plus. And these can be in the region of $17, $20, $22 for one attraction. Now, worth pointing out, you can purchase these individual lightning lanes and not have purchased Disney Genie Plus. So if you really have that one ride, such as Guardians of the Galaxy, you're able to do that ride at an experience at an increased cost, which I've got to be honest, this has been a case for the sort of whole Walt Disney World of the last decade or so. The penny pinching that's trying to make that little bit of difference. A great example was when Bob Chapek was CEO and decided to start charging people to park at the hotels. That was a whole baffling series. And when Bob Iger came back in as CEO, that was scrapped immediately. But I'm going to turn it over to you then, Lauren, in terms of how do we think Genie Plus is impacting the crowd flow and the crowd management compared to the previous ones?
So obviously it's really hard to tell because I think that lots more people are going to Disney, so it's hard to say whether or not it's just a general crowd influx or if it is Genie Plus. However, when Genie Plus came in, the crowds definitely did get worse. The wait times got much worse. And I think it's because it's a paid service. People see these people going down the lightning lane thinking, I want a bit of that. So then Disney then get the money because you think, right, next time we're just going to have to bite the bullet and do Genie Plus. And then you get more people doing Genie Plus. So they completely stop the standby line and let them through. Whereas I feel like FastPass, it was a little bit more like, right, you go and then stop and then, right, FastPass, right, you need to stop there and then the standby queue. It was a little bit more to and fro-in. So the standby obviously lasted a lot shorter.
Yeah, and there are different flow rates for different attractions depending on what they're expecting. But because of the way that Disney Genie Plus works, unlike FastPass, there aren't a set number throughout the day. So it's going to be difficult to be able to judge from an operations perspective the number of flow that you could have in the standby line versus the number of flow you can have in the lightning lane line. My overarching sort of thought on this, however, is this improving the customer experience? I would probably say not. Now, if you are a customer who is going on this once in a lifetime trip, you're going to be there for maybe 4 or 5 days, for example. And, if you're a 1 or a 2 ship in terms of number of people, you could perhaps shell out that extra $60, $65, $70 for 2 of you for a day, you do that 5 times over, it's $350, but it means you get more out of your overall experience. But I think about, your position, Lauren, if you have a family of 4, if you came over for 2 weeks and you were trying to put that, you're putting thousands of dollars extra onto your bill. So in terms of pros and cons, then, can we see any positives from Disney Genie Plus?
I think it's positive for those who do have the money, and it's a drop in the ocean for those people. They think, I want to go on that ride and I want to go on it now, therefore I will do, and I can pay for that privilege. Fine, you can do that, but for the average Joe, I can't see many positives personally.
No, I agree. And actually, for those who are unaware, the My Disney Experience app has this Genie Plus within it. There is a tip board, which what it can do is, without charge, this is worth adding, you can ask it to populate your day depending on where you are, and it tries to work out average wait times. It tries to work out where it could best get you for your experience based off the sort of rides that you would like, or even some specific ones. Call me skeptical. I don't know if that's a subtle way of doing crowd flow management by directing you to quieter part of the parks. But then again, you may get more out of that, especially if you are new or have less of an intimate understanding with how Walt Disney World operates. I think to sort of bring this back, then, do we ever see a scenario in which Disney Genie Plus as a paid service changes?
I think as long as people are paying for it, no.
Agreed. I agree. And actually, is there a next level to this? Is there a $400 option? Which I know there is a version of this that exists anyway. But is there a $400 version in the same way that Universal is doing with Epic Universe, where you can just have FastPass all day, no restraints? Is that taking away from something that I felt Disney had Walt Disney World at least did really good for parity? When you walked in through the gates, yes, some people can afford to dine at the fine dining restaurants. Yes, some people can afford more of the Mickey snacks than others, but you were there and you were in it. And if you knew how to use the system under the old FastPass method, you were able to get more out of it. And I'm not sure that's true anymore. So with that said, then, if you had the power, you're Josh D'Amaro for a minute. You're responsible for all parks and experiences under the Walt Disney Corporation banner. Do you bring back the old FastPass, or do you install something new, or do you leave it as is?
I mean, business-wise, you would just leave it as is, wouldn't you? It's raking. I would love to know the figures. It's raking in so much money. Business-wise, it just would not make sense for you to not make people pay for it now. It's been this way for quite a while now, so people just expect it. And people like me who used to use the FastPass service, who I honestly can say I've never used Genie because I disagree with paying for it. I've done all the attractions. I don't mind. I don't have to do absolutely everything when I go there. So business-wise, no, I'd keep it the same. It's clearly working. But experience-wise, for those people who, have been going for a long time, or even the annual pass holders, it's kind of disadvantaging them, isn't it? And I feel like they're alienating that population a little bit.
So I have a confession to make. Right for the end of the episode, I have purchased and used Disney Genie Plus before. However,
Traitor.
It was at Disneyland in California, and I was there for 3 days. And I didn't know when I would be back. This is, by living on the East Coast of America, getting to the West Coast isn't as difficult compared to coming from the UK, like in your situation. So I had 3 days in Disneyland. We purchased as part of our tickets, so it was about $30 per person per day for the Disney Genie Plus add-on. And we got literally every attraction done between Disneyland and Disney California Adventure in that time. So this is, and I wanted to leave that towards the end because I understand the appeal. if you are going to these places for a few short days, it might be worth that extra purchase if you can afford it. It was certainly the right decision for us. It created a lot more walking because we were sort of going to and from different sections of the park, but it actually worked out well. And yeah, I don't have any regrets either. I must say. So it was certainly the right time. But this proves the point, doesn't it? That if you are in the right circumstances, it may not necessarily be a poor purchase choice. What we're going to do to end this, then we're going to sort of give them a scores out of 5, which we thought which system was better. So we'll start with the original FastPass. Then, in terms of crowd flow, in terms of availability, in terms of accessibility, out of 5, what would you have given the old school FastPass method, Lauren?
I would give it a 4, simply because if you didn't know the system, you were disadvantaged. You know, if you didn't know that you needed to go to these attractions at the start of the day to get your return time at a reasonable time, because you don't want to be returning at 9 p.m., you know, if you're there at the start of the day. And obviously it wasn't as well known on Google and stuff like that then. So, yeah, I'd give it a 4 just for the accessibility side of things. But nevertheless, I loved it.
This is a huge sidebar, but do you remember the old VHS tapes that the Walt Disney Company would produce to advertise Disney? And I distinctly remember there was one segment of one, and I don't know what year it was, but they were doing Splash Mountain and they were explaining FastPass as the old physical FastPass tickets. I think there's a sense of nostalgia for me for the old school FastPass. I'd give it a 5. We were able to use the system and get more done. I saw very little wrong with it. I think the only disadvantage is certainly if you struggle to move quickly from place to place, that could absolutely be perceived as a disadvantage. But overall, I thought it was a great one. And as we
one more advantage that I've got, actually, is something that I've just remembered. If you were to get a return time and you couldn't make it, you know, you had a dinner reservation, or, you know, you were leaving the park for whatever reason, giving that pass to another family just gave you so much love. It was great. You know,
wasn't it?
And you were saying, oh, who should we choose? Who should we choose? And then we saw this family, and you'd give it to them, and it was like giving your own pixie dust. It was like giving your own magic. That'll give it another 0.5.
I completely forgot about that. I completely forgot that you would have, you know, like we're leaving the park or whatever. Do you guys want our Splash Mountain tickets or whatever? I completely forgot about that. And that in itself can tick it to 5. I mean, I'd give it 5 out of 5 anyway, but that can tick it to 5 out of 5 for me. That's a great suggestion. In terms of Disney FastPass Plus, then I'd probably give it a 3. It required a little bit more prior planning, and I distinctly remember a holiday we were on where you sat there with the iPad for the days before trying to track everything, and then, you know, it was really difficult. I'd personally give that a 3. Where are you at with the old?
Yeah, I'd probably say 3.5. The reason
we're doing halves now.
The reason for the half
should have been out of 10.
Because I'm a planner. I do love planning, and it means that I knew what I was doing for my holiday 30 days in advance.
Yeah, that's fair. I get that. And then to top it off, then the final Genie Plus system. What are you going to score it then, Lauren?
I think you know my score. I'm going to score it like a 2.
Yeah, I agree with a 2.
I think it's just because it's pricing people. I mean, Disney's expensive anyway. But then to add this massive cost on top, it's just pricing people out. I mean, as you say, for a couple, like a fairly young couple who don't have any children, who are there for a couple of days, yeah, fair enough. Fill your boots. It's not that bad. But for a family of 4 who's there for 2 weeks, not doable.
I agree. And you know, I think that it appears sort of money grabbing to a certain degree from Disney parks experiences, which is not what we want, because ultimately, you know, we want people to fall in love with Disney as a brand and as an idea, and to continue the, you know, working there and the legacy that's been built upon different generations. I do think that the money grabbing as an entity is seen as a real negative on the face of the corporation. We'll draw stumps there then on this week. Thank you very much all for listening to episode 4 of Monorail Memoirs. If you want to follow us on social media in terms of Instagram and TikTok, you'll see the ticker along the bottom. We are at Monorail Memoirs. If you wish to email us at I can't even remember the right email. It is monorailmemoirs@gmail.com, and feel free to comment in the YouTube video. We will make sure to read and reply to all of them that we can. Thank you very much for your attendance this week. We'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, please stand clear of the doors. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.